come to the announcement of the winners of the short story competition. I would like to call on Brian Leyden to announce the results and ask the winners to introduce their winning entries. The first prize winner will read their full story, and the second and third prize winners will introduce their story and read a short extract. Brian is no stranger to our festival. He's been here before and was very well received, so definitely invited back again. Brian is a novelist, short story writer, memoirist, screenwriter and editor. He has written extensively about his home area for RTE Sunday Miscellany. He has received numerous awards, including Francis McManus Short Story Award. He is a recipient of the Norman Mailer Writers Colonial Scholarship USA, and you can read further from his bio in the program. Following the announcement of the winners and the readings, Brian will read from his own works. Thank you.
Oh yes, writers, that's yes, it's a great pleasure to be here, to be back again after an absence of years here at the Edgeworth Festival on our birthday and the anniversary of it. So very much like going, you get so far through the stories and then it gets really difficult. Then it's the features group. What do? You make a decision, and I would say that I love the stories. I loved all of them, and it was a great pleasure reading them, and each brought something to the table in a very contrasting and different way. A different judge, different result, me in a different mood, me with a different interest. Very much struck the chord there with what Vaughan was saying, the drive west, chimed with something in your consciousness there. I had written a book called Summer of '63, and there was a beautiful story. There was a lot of that detail of that time and that area. So these were the sort of events that came to my mind. So what I'll do is I'll read what my notes here, why did I pick these stories and what was in my mind, and then I'll call out the winners from third, second, first. So to borrow a phrase from Somerset Maugham, he said that there are 3 rules to writing a great short story. Unfortunately, nobody knows what they are. But I'd like to read just a little passage that Richard Ford, from a marvellous introduction he wrote to the Granted Book of the American Short Story, where he says, "I don't know why people write stories. Raymond Carver said he wrote them because he was drunk, a lot, and his kids were driving him crazy, and a short story was all he had concentration for. And sometimes he said he wrote them in part to cars." And in fact, Carlo Gabriel, many of you might know, and Carlo, the wing author of these tales, his collection of short stories about life in prison, he told me that he knew he was going to work in Dublin, in Trinity, he would get on in Drummond, the finished story had to be done by the time he started in Drummond to get off in Connolly Station. They're all that length, and he brought them in at that length of that train journey. That was another way of getting it done. Perhaps, says Richard Ford, on a slightly more majestic other hand, there's a rage for order in certain of us, a fury which the novelists are moralists at heart, and the form lends itself to acceptable expressions of caution. You're not paying enough attention to your life, parcelled out as it is in increments smaller and more significant than you seem aware of. And I think that's it. It's about these little parcels of life, bringing your notice to things. And there is, we talked about in the class today, the moral, Mariah was on about the moral tone. And sometimes moralising, and certainly now it has gone out of fashion, but there can be a moral in your story. And it can have a moral intent, I think maybe. The stories that I've chosen, in third place I chose In Jackie's Footsteps by Sheila Smith. I chose it for the richness of the recall and the period detail, which kind of answers an essential question that every reader asks of a story. Where is this? And when is this? And I chose it too for the kind of evocation of a mindset and a way of being at a glorious time in life with sometimes inglorious outcomes, as happens in the story. For the Design of Happiness, the short story that took second place, which is by Alex Rhys Abbott, it poses a terrible and a very deeply moving question. How do you make better the life of a motherless child by throwing this party? And it's a story of challenge and anxiety and a kind of humble salvation at the end of it. And it was shaded just slightly by Postpartum, which is the winning short story by Lynn O'Keefe. And the first prize short story, it introduces us to a character in a state of what, to borrow a phrase from Philip Roth, in a state of vivid transformation. It's the mother in this story is alive, unlike the previous story, the mother is alive, but she's inundated, she's depressed, and she's beleaguered by a sense of her own inadequacy. And it's a story written in a blunt and kind of occasionally even overwrought sort of a style which fits the voice of the person in it. And it's really about a flight from responsibility. And I gave it first place for the way that the writer rises to the challenge set by the critic Frank Kergmore, where he speaks in the sense of an ending about endings. And we were talking about endings in the workshop, and he said, ends are only ends, he says, when they frankly transfigure the events in which they are imminent. And it's this thing about the events, something about the opening of the story, the ending, there's a sense it's imminent. This is about to happen. Something about this is leading to something, and you get it right, and it's all leading, and it satisfies something. That little way, the story and the events have been parcelled together. So, in other words, what made Postpartum the winning story is the way, a seemingly inevitable, and also the inevitability of the end just still manages to surprise and turn things on our head. So, and in doing that, it transfigures everything that came before in the story. So, in third place, though, I have, is Sheila here ready to read? Yes. Sheila will have you read an excerpt, please, from Jackie's.
So my story is set in the early 60s, which a lot of people look back on as swinging. Well, in my story, they're not so swinging for the two main characters, Pam and Sarah. At the time, they were just preparing for the great institution of the 60s, the dress dance. At the time, President Kennedy's inauguration was flashed all over the press. When Sarah saw the photograph of Jackie bound for the ball in Washington's Mary Clark Hotel, she decided to remodel the bridesmaid dress she had worn for her sister's wedding. She would copy the gown designed for the First Lady by Oleg Cassini. The dressmaker managed to hide her surprise as Sarah presented her with the newspaper clipping. Her scarlet satin bridesmaid's dress, with a little bit of imagination and 2 yards of scallop lace, would become an elegant fashion statement, or so she hoped. When the big night arrived, Sarah sucked in her jeans to simulate classic bone structure, backcombed her hair into a perfect French roll. Long after Pam had departed in a flurry of chiffon, her name was called on the intercom. She found Paul waiting for her at reception in all his higher splendour. When they joined the others at the table at the dance, the dinner had already started. Sarah soon realised why Paul had been so late. It was clear he was several drinks ahead. Panicking, Sarah grabbed his hand and led him to the dance floor, where everyone was doing their own version of the twist. "Who's been practicing in front of the mirror?" Paul said, but Sarah's stare was nothing compared to his. His wiry frame rose up and down. He never missed a beat as his angular legs described geometric figures that defied gravity. A small group gathered in appreciation. For one brief moment, Sarah felt that this could be a night to remember, but too soon she realized that you cannot defy gravity, as Paul lost his footing and sprawled on the dance floor.
Our second reader, and in second place, is a story called The Design of Happiness by Alex Leith Abbott.
What a lovely attentive audience. And thank you so much to the committee and the judges for all your hard work. And Aoife for the lovely singing. This is a story about trying to make people happy. What could possibly go wrong? Can you still hear me okay? Great. Okay, The Design of Happiness. The truth is, I am way out of my depth. Fiona rubbed her temple. She'd spent a week swapping and fretting, striving to design the perfect cheer-up meal for her niece. Finally, she settled the menu. Corn chips and mild store-bought salsa. Kerry is only 6. Roast chicken, not too much garlic, with roasties and salad. Then an ice cream sundae, choice of flavours made to order with fresh fruit, mini marshmallows, homemade chocolate sauce, and/or sprinkles. By Saturday, she was confident she'd sorted the evening meal, money no object. She could prepare most of the food beforehand, and apart from the emergency backstop donuts from Orla's Bakery, it was nutritionally balanced, wholesome, without being boring. After agonising over drinks, she'd settled on a range of juices and flavoured milks, all Kerry's favourites, party food without party. And still, a migraine threatened. At the supermarket, she picked up a discounted pack of Christmas crackers left over from last year. The box was crushed, but the crackers still looked fine. She hadn't gone overboard with lights or balloons or party treats. She wasn't trying to celebrate or pretend that nothing had happened. She wasn't in denial. She simply wanted her niece to get out of the house and have a good time, even for a little while. For the grown-ups, she'd stocked the fridge with beer and wine. She was fairly sure her sister would have approved, except Annie had been gone 2 months by then, which was the whole reason she was back in town house-sitting, and why Kerry and her father were coming for dinner. Before they'd made it over the threshold, Phoebe sprang into her usual over-enthusiastic welcome, jumping and ear-piercing barking served with a dash of saliva. Kerry drifted in, shadowing her father. Clutching his hand tight, she flicked nervous glances at Phoebe. Phoebe was a seasoned tricolour Jack Russell of 18 months. Fiona was a novice dog sitter of 1 month. She'd struck a package deal, a centrally located colonial cottage with car at a reduced rate in exchange for dog sitting. Phoebe's unrelenting, bounding canine cheerfulness and general love of life was hard to take, especially before breakfast. Fiona didn't dislike her per se, she simply found her behaviour a constant mystery and source of stress. For this occasion, she'd splashed out on rookie-level calming behaviour modification, a bag of bright treats beef flavour, and a rawhide bone, jumbo. Anything to help mealtime pass smoothly. Thank you.
And it's my great pleasure now again to call on the winner of the first prize of this year's Mariah Edgeworth Short Story Competition. Her name is Lynn O'Keefe and her story is Postcard. Thank you.
I just want to thank Brian as well for reading my story and liking it. Very encouraging, so that I'll hopefully keep writing. And thanks to the hosts as well. It's a lovely festival and a lovely town. I actually have in-laws here, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't been here as much as I should, so I'm delighted to be here today. And the music was beautiful, the band and the evening was amazing. So thank you for setting it up. Lovely. My story, Postpartum, is a fiction piece, but very much driven by emotions that I've had as an emerging new mother, so I hope you enjoy it. I sat in the front seat, the heat from the car fan blasting my face, and I cried. The rain on the windscreen mirrored my tears perfectly. They were flowing heavily and felt never-ending. I tried to stop the tears, but then the sobbing started. My shoulders shook violently. I felt like I was being ripped apart from the inside out. It had been a stupid fight, like how all our fights had started. He had cooked me breakfast, eggs and toast, perfectly peppered with a soft yolk, toast buttered and melting temptingly, a nice cup of piping hot tea. Then, as he placed it in front of me, he left me to it with the girls climbing all over me. He was on his phone again, texting, oblivious. The soft yolks ran cold. The girls took all the good crispy bits of fried egg white, toast turned soft and soggy. Libby knocked my tea over. I got cross. They cried. He continued texting, oblivious. I slammed on my shoes and stormed out, shopping bag in tow. Shut the door to crying children and my husband saying, "What the?" Jumped into the car and drove away as fast as I could. Then I sat in the car park of the grocery store and I cried. I let it all come out. The resentment, the inner turmoil. I loved my girls, but I was broken. My relationship with my husband was broken. I cried for who I used to be and what I had become. I tried to love and love and love, but ultimately I returned to angry wife, cross mummy, only causing tears and sadness in those cute little faces. I wasn't always so miserable. I used to be interesting and fun. I just wanted to run away from it all, escape. The car was still running, so I drove out of that car park, turned right, and I headed straight for the motorway. The motorway headed straight for the airport. I switched onto autopilot as I drove further away from my life. It all happened so fast. I left the car, left the keys with airport security, gave them my husband's name and number, told him to give me until the end of the day before they called him. I booked the next flight to Sydney. My passport had been in my bag as I was copying it for a work form. It was fate, meant to be. I only had to wait 2 hours and I was on board. Then I was en route to the harbour city, to my new life. They were better off without me. I numbed myself to the pain of separating. My mother had regularly labelled me as cold. Now I could put into practice what she preached. I had to let them go. I had to tear their memories out of my life. I succeeded. My husband left me alone, never asked me to come back. He knew where I was. He knew why. He knew we didn't work anymore. He knew that they were all better off without me. So here I sit today in a coffee shop in Byron Bay. She found me. My first daughter, Mel. She wants to meet me. She's 21 now, halfway through a degree in art history. I have to face her. I spent so long breaking myself to detach myself from my memories of them. I succeeded in building myself back up again. Now she's coming and threatening to tear it all back down. I know she'll hate me. Maybe she just wants to throw a glass of water in my face and walk away with the image of my shocked, pathetic, dripping head. If that's what she wants, I will let it happen. A quick burst of resentful rage and we can separate again. That will cause the least pain. But what if she wants to talk? What if she wants to know why? I don't know what to say to her. I don't want to open it all up again. It's like pulling out stitches before a wound has healed and the blood pouring out again. Torture, messy, unnecessary, nonsensical. Mel had managed to get a phone number for a friend of mine, an old school friend. She was the friend who I'd ran to in Sydney when I had left my family all those years before. My friend told me that I have no choice now, that I have to face my daughter. I have to face them both at some point. I owe it to them. I have gotten my life back, but they have unfinished business. I brought them into the world, and whether I wanted to accept it or not, they will always be a part of me. Her voice had tried to hide her anger. She had a young family too when I ran to her for support. Her mother had died young. Where her mother had been taken from her, I had chosen to take myself away from my daughters. Yet she still took me in. She never judged me, even though I had abandoned my family. She stood by me while I grieved. She helped me start over again. I didn't just owe this meeting to my daughter, I owed it to my friend. It was the mother and daughter meeting that she could never have. I listened to her, I accepted it. I have to face my past. Will I tell Mel the truth about why I left? Will she even want to know? Could she cope with my selfish decision to move on with my life without them? Can I cope with it? I was a mess back then, before I escaped. My second miscarriage had set me up to be more anxious than usual. We were planning to have a baby the second time. I only realised after experiencing the second miscarriage that there had been the first years before. We were very young, weren't ready for a baby the first time. In spite of the fact it unsettled me, the fact that I had had a miscarriage but hadn't known it. I did get pregnant not long after the second miscarriage. Then, for 5 years, I was either pregnant or breastfeeding. The debilitating morning sickness, broken nipples, lax bladder, and distorted body of the early days was easy in comparison to the dark feelings that crept in later on down the line. Colic combined with toddler tantrums and sleep deprivation tipped me over the edge. When colic and tantrums passed, I still couldn't escape the encroaching darkness. I was never good enough. There was always something to please, but I noticed that I generally left them unpleased. I anticipated my children's need for food and play and love. I could meet their needs, especially the love, but I wasn't a natural mom. I had to work hard at it. I wished I could just enjoy it more like the other moms did. I felt guilty that I wasn't enjoying them more. My relationship with my husband had always been rock solidly evolving until we had children. After 2 children under the age of 3, we realized that we were facing an unknown black hole. My life had stopped while his had continued. When I looked at his options, it played like a life for the taking. I felt that while his career and life progressed, mine was at a standstill, with downhill the only direction open to me. I began to resent his work trips, social trips, and complaints in general about life. Our love life had become stagnant and scarce due to exhaustion. We both had our part to play, and I internalized it as my fault. It was my job as the woman to keep the spark alive. I watched social media and magazines blast out images of all these moms returning to their better than before birth bodies. Magazine covers flaunted them lustily in front of me in their lingerie. I knew that they must have been keeping their man happy. I looked more gaunt than healthy and pretty during those years. I also felt like a constant disappointment to my birth family and my in-laws. Obligations and expectations went unmet as I tried to prioritize my husband and my babies. A gesture or a visit would turn into a source of tension on both sides. Miscommunication thrived, dysfunction ensued. It would all have been enough to drive anyone crazy. It did drive me crazy. Anxieties plagued me daily. Panic attacks took hold at the most inconvenient times. Driving, in a queue at a grocery store, at the playground. Unhelpful comments about my anxieties and parenting plagued me. Can't a baby be left to cry for a few minutes anymore? Nobody died. I don't let those depressing feelings get to me. You've changed. I internalized all the comments and I believed them. My fault. To those who said them, they were just passing comments or thoughts. To me, those comments became who I was. If I was perceived as imperfect to others, then I was failing at it all. I did fail. Failed as a mother, a wife, a sibling, a daughter, an in-law, a friend. So that rainy day 18 years ago, I made the selfish decision to leave them all behind, block them all out, numb myself to it all. Then she found me. I recognise her immediately, tall and lean, as beautiful as in my catalogue of memories and imaginings. Golden hair sparkling in the Sydney sun, every head turning as she walks into the cafe, drawing everyone to her with her dazzling blue eyes. Just enough grey in them to cloud them and leave her mystery to all. Floating through the bustling cafe, her face searches. Her eyes land on mine. She freezes. I don't know how she knows me, but then, how do I know her? We both stare for an age and then she runs to me. Her graceful movements turn erratic and clumsy. She knocks off chairs and people. Everyone's staring. Her arms throw themselves around me. I feel her face in my neck and she sobs loudly. I tentatively place my arms around her shaking shoulders. It all flashes back to me. Small pudgy arms around my neck, wet faces on my cheek, snotty noses rubbing themselves clean on my shoulder, ouchies rubbed away by a gentle hand, skin softer than silk, tiny toes and fingers, smiles, giggles, and early morning cuddles. Can you tell me a story, Mummy? One I've never heard before. Splashing in puddles on rainy days, soakings with watering hoses on hot summer days, milk messes and chocolate smeared faces. Suddenly, I'm transported back to the front seat of the car in the grocery store car park. My sobbing quiets to muffles. My shoulders settle still. The pounding rain now a soft drizzle. I look in the rearview mirror and my eyes are swollen and red. The car is still running and I drive out of the car park. Turn left. I drive back home to smiling daughters and a forgiving husband. I stay. I never leave. I never leave. I never leave. I never leave.
Sometimes, your story, when you have to read it in public, is the final test of the piece of work. It's something you feel you can get up and get behind. And you certainly passed that. It's my job to read a little. I changed my plan for reading because I was talking to Camilla Kelly, and we were on about how actually having a writer in the family is the death of a family, because you start spilling all the family secrets and all the stories start coming out. It's a very dangerous thing to have a writer. And I knew when I got this story it was very good, but it wasn't one that was supposed to come out. And I think if Vona earlier was appealing to your memories banks, if you remember doilies, in this one you have to remember Green Shield stamps. Restored to them, and they come in yards, and you had to get a sponge nearly to wet them. There was that many, and the books would buckle, the dam, and you'd send off this massive wedge of books, and you'd get the smallest item back. But anyway, this is called Yankee Parcels. We collected Green Shield stamps And when we had the right amount of books full of stamps, we sent them off with an order and got back a household gift in the post. We never got anything bigger than a toaster, but we liked to tease our postman, Jimmy Noon, saying we'd sent away for a wheelbarrow that he would have to push by a hand from the post office up the side of the mountain to cross Edgeworth village. Now, Jimmy never had to contend with the wheelbarrow, but every so often an enormous brown cardboard parcel arrived that he had to balance somehow on his bicycle. We lived over halfway up the mountain, and it was a hard push whenever a Yankee parcel came. Propped on the crossbar, the cardboard sides of the parcel lost their stiffness with the moisture from his body, and Jimmy was forced to stop often to adjust his sack of letters and take off his cap to wipe the grime and the scalp oil from the leather headband. But even in the hottest weather, it was a matter of fierce pride that he wore his full uniform, the heavy navy blue trousers, the brass buttoned jacket, the hard peaked cap like a policeman. His old-fashioned uniform conjured up associations with the early Irish Free State Army and police force, and the uniform conferred a certain authority on our postman. He could report unlicensed dogs, and unlicensed bulls, and unlicensed televisions, or if you had a black and white television license, even though he owned one of the new colour sets. He could make a reliable guess at most of the business going on in a household by the number of official brown envelopes, domestic white envelopes, or foreign stamped letters that came in the post. Now, Nan, my mother, had a soft spot for Jimmy. All of the women did. He was a bachelor who said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, ma'am," when he spoke to the women. And he carried news between their houses, deaths, accidents, whose children were off school or sick, or whose cattle were on the road. Anyone who brings news into a house brings news out of the house. Jimmy got tea from the women, bread and jam if the household was busy, or a galty processed cheese, and a slice of tomato, and a slice of fresh soda bread on better days. If he had a letter for only maybe one house on the mountain, he had to make do with his own sandwich, which was a bit of white bread scattered thinly with onion. He was all smiles the day he brought an American parcel into our kitchen. It made him happy to be able to present such a hefty offering to my mother, and the parcel earned him a full dinner. You had some load on a hot day, my mother said, feeling guilty because she put him to so much trouble. "I'm kilt out with the heat, ma'am." Well, she says, rest yourself for a minute. And while she began to peel the potatoes, Jimmy stretched his legs and took his ease, his boots shining under the table and his peaked cap left on the oilcloth. They talked about the weather, and Jimmy said he met a Mrs. Gaffney the other day running with a bottle of holy water in her fist to sprinkle on the roof of the hen house as the storm was rising. He watched her splash holy water on the loose sheets of iron be lifted by the gale, and when she finished he said, "Would you like me to throw a rope on that as well, ma'am, just in case the holy water doesn't work?" After the hour, he glanced at his watch. He was on overtime now for the delivery of the parcel, and he fitted the metal bars of a jew's harp between his front teeth and began to twang out a tune. We had to wait until Jimmy left before we could rip open the parcel. The softened cardboard tore easily, and the delay caused by the fortified bands of brown tape only added to the anticipation. On top, there was a note from my mother, and then the dresses, the frocks and the skirts, and dime bars made from American chocolate with a mysterious, almost unpleasant flavour that harmonised with the smell of the clothes, a blend of exotic fabrics, camphor mothballs, and ozone after the parcel's slow sea passage. Some of the clothes from America we could wear, like the t-shirts and the jeans, but even the jeans were a funny shape, and the dresses for my mother were so gaudy she would never dare to be seen out in them, and the men's jackets for my father were loud enough to frighten the cat. Instead, the garden path became a catwalk where we strutted in the American sequined gowns and the high heels and the extravagant hats, and twirled and pouted in the costume jewellery for our own amusement. We also gave out the big suits and pretended we were our uncle, saying, "God damn, somebody ought to do something with guns." And we loved to dress up. And you might think that we were ungrateful for the suits that perfectly fitted those barbershop groomed men on the sunny sidewalks and broad avenues of America. The Spangles, the taffeta, the gaudy fabrics of the women's dresses looked ridiculous in any other setting. Ireland wasn't ready yet for the brash individuality of these cast-offs. And though we were always on hand when a parcel from America was opened, we never noticed what came for Matt and Nan, my parents, under the lurid camouflage: contraceptives. Forbidden by law in the Irish Free State, they came hidden in the American fashion magazine at the bottom of the parcel. And never once in all those years did our postman, in his state-issue blue uniform, suspect the kind of content he was employed to carry into our house while he smiled and waited for the spuds to go. Wisdom and lore of the place, and knowing that Maria Edgeworth was never married but had turned a suitor down. This is a tiny thing called The Proposal from Sweet Old World. It's about a neighbour of ours, Johnny. He was a bachelor, he was a coal miner in Arigna, and one of these small-time cattle dealers, not a farmer, which was lower in rank because he didn't own land. He would have been a bit of a tangler. He could be rough, uncouth, blunt, but he always spoke his mind. And for a while he went out with a local girl called Mary Reynolds. And then he went to see her father to ask for the daughter's hand in marriage. The father didn't want Johnny next nor near his precious only daughter. And he turned down Johnny's proposal, saying, "The man that marries my daughter will be decent, clean, honest, sober, hard-working, have land of his own and money in the bank." "I understand," said Johnny, "you want her to do better than her mother." I love those that just produce. This is slightly longer, and I'll finish with this piece. It's from a new novel called Summer of '63, and when I was reading Sheila's story, I was so there because I'd done my research. Summer of '63 is the summer, of course, that John F. Kennedy comes to Ireland. And it's not that he features much in the novel at all, although I was intrigued, Sheila, I did dig up an old Evening Herald with the photos from just around that time, 63, of when Kennedy was in the country. I use it as a device for, and this is, I suppose, if you're writers and you're interested in writing novels about your own area, it's a useful thing to do is to actually parachute a stranger into the place you come from. So they're seeing it with new eyes, and it's legitimate to describe the place because it's all new to them. So what's familiar to you is not familiar to your main character. So the main character here is a young boy, Leo Rossiter. He's an asthmatic young only son. His parents have moved in to manage the shop and pub. His mother is a huge fan and has done up the new lounge, what she calls the American Lounge, with flags and plates of the inauguration for the Kennedys, and there's flags flying. And actually with this new American Lounge, she's built specially, she's the television coming. That was the first big RTV rental surges when the president was in town. And she has the American flags flying. But the flat roof is a brilliant spot for the romantic interest, Bernice Hickey, who is a bit older than the boy, but of course he has a crush on her now at this stage. And she uses the flat roof as a private place, as a sun trap to sunbathe. So this is summer of '63. When my parents left in Enniscorthy to come to Orignal, to run the pub and shop and the guest house combined, that belonged to the colliery owners, Bernice Hickey already lived on the premises. Her job included accommodation, so you could say she came with the business. And while no one ever said to me straight out she was alone in the world, I'd noticed how she never had people belonging to her visit. She got no letters or cards, and she never went anywhere. She'd come straight from an industrial school to take up a job in the village shop. Now, being an only child, I couldn't imagine what it must be like to have no father or mother watching you like a hawk. In the past couple of months, Bernice had started to wear her skirts and her hair shorter than normal. Plus, she had my mother demented, playing the same Beatles song over and over since the long-playing record Please Please Me came out in March. Daddy, who only ever listened to Jim Reeves, warned Mammy to say nothing. Bernice was a bright and capable girl, he said, and she didn't have much around here to keep her entertained. Deep down, Bernice had to know she was really good looking, but she didn't socialise much and she didn't have a boyfriend. Without letting her know I was there on the roof, I watched as she stirred in the deck chair and raised one of her slim, pale legs to see if she was getting the colour. I felt that uncomfortable tingle at the bottom of my lungs start again, caused this time by the smell of tar underfoot rising from the hot felt roof. Her short dark hair was held in place with a headband, and as Bernice leaned forward, my interest moved from her raised leg to the pale delicacy of her neck, and the way that her chin rested on her chest, where the rise of her breast started, below the neckline of her sleeveless white top. When I let the air in my lungs escape, I heard a low asthmatic rattle. I tried to tell myself I wasn't interested in Bernice in a sleazy, wheezy way, but seeing how her candy-striped shorts and tight-fitting top displayed her womanly figure to full advantage, my curiosity boiled over like a small saucepan full of milk. Bernice was thirsty and looked hot, and it made me happy to be able to display the bottles of Fanta I'd lifted from the shop as I approached. I got you a mineral, I called out. Did you pay for those? I thought it and said, I can put them back if you like. No, she says, I'll settle up for them later. Have you an opener? And I got out the opener with a pocket knife, and it had one little short blade and one long blade, and I'd honed the long blade devilishly sharp with a wheat stone from the shop, and beside the small blade was a hook for catching the edge of caps on bottles. I bent, flipped off the 2 mineral bottle caps without spilling a drop, and handed her the drink across to Bernice, and proudly put away the pocket knife. We were both thirsty, and the Fanta was tangy and sweet. What had been a clear day, however, was now growing darker, and in the direction of Drumshanbo, the muddy orange-coloured sky above the town was full of low booms and rumbles. There was not a breath of air to stir the American flag on its pole on the roof, and the rumbles were getting louder, and I kept a tight eye on the clouds where they were darkest, and I reckoned I'd soon see a flash of lightning. Come away from there, Bernice said. Come right back from the edge. You're making me nervous. I said, well, look, if you're nervous of heights, I said, you have to push yourself and fight back against the fear. That's what I do when I get wheezy and asthmatic. I run against the hill until the attack goes away. She said, I'm happy how I am. And she finished her mineral while I went back to watching the storm brew. The sky was now as purple as the outfit worn by the Phantom in the Ghost Who Walks jungle comic books. And out of the corner of my eye, I glimpsed a bright bolt of lightning. After several seconds, the boom came like the sound of a 20-gallon iron tar barrel being rolled across the covered heavens, and more low booms echoed from the mountain slopes behind us. Ever since the Cuban Missile Crisis last October, The world stood on the brink of all-out nuclear war. I kept having dreams about atom bombs exploding, a fantastic, bright detonation behind the mountain overlooking the village, followed by a giant mushroom-shaped cloud swelling to fill the entire sky as I waited for the shockwave to hit. But I woke up every time an instant before the atom bomb blast struck and reduced me to a scorch mark on the outside wall of the pub, as though incinerated by an almighty bolt of lightning. Quick as a wink, a fork of lightning did streak across the heavens directly overhead. "Wow," I said, "did you see that?" Bernice was already out of her deck chair and on her bare feet gathering up her belongings to get off the roof. I moved to collect the metal and canvas deck chair. I was nervous about how to fold it properly, but it was light and easy to manage, and I was happy to follow Bernice as she hurried towards her bedroom window where the lace curtains had started to flutter. We made it into the room ahead of the rain, but as I turned around to fix the curtains, I saw another fork of lightning strike downwards out of the clouds. I lowered and fastened the bottom half of the window just as the crack of thunder reached us. Bernice said, "Come away from the window." I moved deeper into the bedroom. She had a poster up on the wall of the Beatles looking cheeky with their mop-top haircuts and smart suits, and under the poster Bernice had the Pie record player with the top open and the Beatles single on the turntable set to play at 45 RPM. And just as I thought, the arm on the record player was lifted across, and it would be playing again now, only a ball of fluff had built up under the needle, and the stylus just slithered across the vinyl and got stuck at the end, making only a clicking sound. Bernice stopped the record and then draped the towel over the bedspread and sat on the edge. "See that brown bottle on the dressing table," she said. "Can you pass it over to me?" Outside, the thunderstorm was close enough for the noise to vibrate the single pane of glass in the window where the putty had crumbled and fallen out. I gave Bernice the brown bottle and she uncapped it and poured milky pink calamine lotion into her hand. Next, she got hold of the bottle, and while she rubbed the lotion into one forearm, I looked at where her skin was red and hot. And then she used her other hand to take up the extra lotion and rub it into the opposite arm, where it too looked tender. And I stood close and poured more of the lotion into her hands, which she rubbed on her legs, and asked, "How's my neck?" "Kind of red too," I said. Bang went the thunder again and began to repel the rain against the windows and down the flat roof, making puddles straight away. And she opened the top button of her sleeveless blouse and pulled the collar open. My face felt hotter than any part of her sunburned skin. "Can I put some lotion on the back of my neck?" she said. I tipped the bottle gently to pour a small amount of the calamine lotion into my hand, and I laid my hand on her warm neck and gently worked the lotion into the skin. And she moved her head around, and I could sense the pleasure it gave her to have her neck and shoulders rubbed. The room itself had grown hot and airless, and I was afraid I was going to start wheezing again, but the calamine lotion smelled lovely, and the perfume heat from her Bernice's skin didn't affect my asthma one bit. She opened up another button and I massaged her lower neck. "That feels good," she said. The rain now swirled outside the windows in full force as the storm struck, but it was so dim and snug and cosy in Bernice's room, it felt like we were cut off from the rest of the world, and I wondered how far I could take this, when a really bright flash of lightning lit up the whole room, a brilliant blue-white. Ready to count off the seconds in my head between the flash and the thunder, I barely got past one before we heard an incredible bang. Bernice flinched, and I increased the pressure of my hands on her shoulders to reassure her, and a burst of hailstones beat against the window. "It's all right," I said. "We're safe here." And she reached up and she put her hand on mine and began to draw me closer. I was ready to ease back onto the bed alongside her when the next violent crack of thunder exploded with a monstrous bang, as if the sky overhead had just been split open by an almighty sledgehammer. Bernice slid out of my grasp, down on her knees on the rug on the floor, and the whole room lit up again with another cannonade, and she said, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." And I had to take up the prayer as Holy Mary. Her niece winced at the next lightning flash and the shot of thunder, but kept up the prayers. And I felt like telling her that it would be better to let go of my hand and make me stand safely back. If God intended to strike down anyone with the next bolt of lightning in this overheated summer downpour dark in our bedroom, it was bound to be me, the sneaky, wheezy best friend, holding her hand, who should be fried alive by heaven's highest voltage for the secret thoughts and longings going on inside my head that I could not mention on pain of death.
This is the European Year of Culture, and I think we're keeping the site up here in Edgeworth. Before we finish, I'd like to thank those who have been very supportive of our annual festival. Mary Carlton Reynolds from Creative Ireland and Longford Librarian, Fergus Kennedy, the Arts Officer, members of Longford County Council and the local community. This event would not be possible without the hard work of the committee under the chairmanship of Angela Chute and Mary Leyden, Galen, Greta Hannon, Mary Kelly, Eamon Brennan, John McGarr and Camilla James Kelly. A special thanks also, I often forget him when I'm making thanking people, and that's Desi Ring. He's always there to help us out with the sound and very supportive in all the things we do. I'd also like to thank the management and the staff of the Manor here who kindly allowed us to use this wonderful facility, and they've laid on some light refreshments afterwards in the dining room. To Sister Dibna, she's very protective of this space here, and woe behold if we don't leave it the way we found it. I remember, she goes back years in my memory. We had I went to Wales in 1965 and she was there in the infirmary, and if we ever tried to skip classes with that, she took her temperature, and the thermometer always read that we were okay. So I'd also like to thank members of the Select Vestry, St John's, for the use, for allowing us to bring visitors to the historic sites here in Edgeworth.